What's going on, guys? Welcome back. Episode 14 of the Next Season podcast. In episode 13, I dove into a brain-based framework for goal setting and pursuing goals at the next level. And we talked about how to break down what you want into actionable steps using some neuroscience tools and tricks that are designed to help you make emotional connection and build that emotional connection to your goals and help you with the pursuit and the adherence in the process. And today, what I want to do is go even deeper. So this episode is not just about your goals and not just about your actions. It's about taking those actions and the goals and the emotional connection you have with them and turning those into habits. So it's not just things that you sustain during the pursuit of the goal and then once you achieve it, but to actually turn those goals, those actions into habits and turn those states into traits, making this part of who you are and what you do. And we're doing this with neuroscience-backed tips and tools. So these are things that are going to work with you and work with your brain so that they become actionable for you. What I want to do is start off by talking about some of the neural processes, some of the things that are going on, the mechanisms in the brain, so you understand some terms and key components of the brain and some of the things that are going on kind of in a goal pursuit cycle. And then I'm going to give you the 5 tips or the 5 tools that I have that you can apply to help you turn these actions and habits, these goals that you set right now, and turn them into part of your identity and part of who you are. So they're sustained habits over time. So let's start off by talking about what's going on in the brain, because if you understand, even at a basic level, some of the mechanisms and some of these processes that are going on, you can use this to your advantage and you can adjust your approach in a way that works for you. This is not a blanket approach for everybody. You have to adjust and modulate an approach that works for you. So this is not meant to be an exhaustive masterclass, and I'm not here to teach you all the neuroscience and the different parts of the brain. I'm not trained or credentialed to do that. And that's not what my role or my goal is. I'm going to have guests that are going to be able to provide much more expertise in these areas, and they're going to be able to share more. What I want to do is share enough for it to be useful information and perhaps create enough interest for you to explore this on your own more. And of course, we can have conversations about this further. At a high level, there are 2 key processes at play when it comes to creating habits in goal setting and goal pursuit and kind of the formation of habits. The first is called long-term potentiation, or LTP, and the second is called long-term depression, or LTD. And so imagine yourself stepping into a batter's box or standing on a pitcher's mound. And if you've ever played on baseball fields, especially the baseball field's been around a long time and maybe don't have professional grounds crews and maintenance crews, over time, the constant use wears down the batter's box, especially the right batter's box, the right-handed hitters, and of course the mound at the rubber, right? It creates those grooves. And the first time you dig in on a brand new field, it's hard, right? It doesn't seem like anything's happening. But if you've played on one of those fields that's been worn over time and not recompacted really well, you know how deep those ditches can be. Maybe a better way to think about this is a game trail or an animal trail in the woods. If you've ever walked through the woods and there's no path or no trail, it's going to take you longer and you're going to have more obstacles and challenges in the way. But if animals have followed that same path for years, or if you take that same path over and over and over, you start to clear that path and becomes much easier for you to get through. And the same thing is going on in your brain. The more you practice habits in the pursuit of goals, or really practice habits and routines in anything, the more clear that path and the more ingrained that habit is. It's easier for you to repeat because it's natural. It's become a habit. And eventually that habit becomes a trait, it becomes part of who you are. And this is your brain's version. This is LTP. All right. This is long-term potentiation. When you repeat in action, like refining your swing or perfecting your fastball your mechanics as a pitcher, your brain strengthens those neural pathways that control the skills that are associated with the body movement. And so it's your brain's way of making those movements and thought patterns faster and more efficient. You can do the same with cognitive things. You can do the same with emotional control and mood regulation and things like that. The more that you practice those habits, the more ingrained, the more of a path that you create inside your brain, and the less it takes you to have to think about it. Okay? That's long-term potentiation. Let's talk about long-term depression, or LTD. This is not about mood or mental health, even though the word depression might make you think that. Instead, it's about your brain filling in and smoothing over the pathways if you stop using them. So think about that same batter's box or the game trail in the woods. If no one steps there for a while, the grooves are going to start to fill back in, or the grass is going to start to grow back over, and the plants are going to start to grow back over. And eventually it's like they were never there. So if you stop practicing the habits that you want to develop, so let's say you've got certain mechanics that you want in a swing, or maybe it's the emotional control, again, the cognitive things. If you stop practicing, so that if you are not practicing your visualization, eventually those pathways start to close back up, and those neural pathways become filled back in. And so it becomes more difficult for you to navigate those same pathways again. You can relearn them, and oftentimes very quickly, but that's what's happening. That's long-term potentiation versus long-term depression. Now, there's a positive side to LTD too. So it's actually a good thing. It's how your brain clears out bad habits and unused patterns. So if you're trying to undo a pattern, the less that you do that pattern. So let's say, for example, you've been pulling your head off a ball, or maybe you're losing focus after an at-bat. LTD helps you unlearn that pattern. The longer that you avoid that bad habit and replace it with a better one, the weaker that pathway becomes of pulling your head off the ball. So that's long-term depression. Think about, again, perfect example is clearing a path in the woods. Long-term potentiation is forging a path. Long-term depression is that path filling back in. So you can use those mechanisms to either create new habits, or to get rid of old habits. And I talk to players about this all the time. They come in and say, I took 50 swings every day for a month or something like that. And when I see their swings and they have some poor movement patterns or flaws, those hundreds of swings have actually further cleared a bad path in that mind-muscle connection, which means it's going to take them more work to break that habit. And this is why consistency matters so much. So every rep you take, every time you show up, you're reinforcing those neural pathways that you want to keep and let go of the ones that you don't. Your brain is literally wiring itself to reflect the habits that you practice the most. So the first thing we want to do is understand those two main mechanisms in the brain, which are responsible for breaking bad habits and establishing new habits, the ones that we want to have. And there's a few more areas of the brain that I want to note, and some key hormones and neurochemicals. I don't want to go too deep on this, but I want to give you some context. So quick and dirty version. Here's some brain regions at work when it comes to goal setting, goal pursuit, and then turning these goals and actions into habits. The prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is responsible for planning, decision-making, and self-control. This sets and prioritizes goals and regulates the effort needed to achieve them. The basal ganglia. This part of the brain supports habit formation and motivation by connecting goal-oriented actions with rewards. So this is the action I'm taking, and this is the outcome I'm going to get. The ventral striatum. This is the key area for the brain's reward system. So this region generates feelings of pleasure, and it reinforces goal-directed behavior. The amygdala plays a role in emotional responses, especially when that goal is tied to fear, excitement, or reward. So again, that emotional connection, big emotional connection, you've got a goal associated with that. That's why we talked about in the previous episode, the importance of establishing what it's going to feel like for you when you achieve it, and what it could feel like for you if you don't pursue it or you don't achieve it. What are those emotional connections? That's all tied to the amygdala. And then finally, my favorite is the anterior midcingulate cortex. And the anterior midcingulate cortex is critical for building grit and resilience. This is called the resilience or the grit part of the brain, especially when tasks associated with your goals are challenging or things that you don't really enjoy, but they are aligned to your long-term goals. So for example, if you know that, if you believe that getting in the habit of doing ice baths or doing stretching, if you don't really like stretching, or doing meditation, if you don't really like doing that, if those things are important to you and important to your goal pursuit, but you don't enjoy them, the anterior midcingulate cortex is at play here to build grit and resilience. But again, this is something that has to be something that you don't enjoy. If you enjoy getting in the ice bath, if you enjoy stretching or meditation, it's not going to have the same effect. So that's an important caveat. So those are some of the brain regions that are involved here in the goal pursuit. I want to talk real quick about key hormones and neurochemicals. Again, very quick conversation, just so you have awareness. Dopamine. You know that this is referred to as the reward molecule. It's also, perhaps more importantly, the motivation molecule. It drives goal-directed behavior and reward success. Serotonin is associated with mood regulation and long-term goal pursuit. So the serotonin is a happy chemical, okay, that makes you feel good. Endorphins is another feel-good chemical that released, especially when you're in action, when you're in movement, and when goals are achieved during effortful physical activity. Norepinephrine or noradrenaline, that enhances your focus and attention during the pursuit of the goal, right? That's the precursor to adrenaline. Okay, so norepinephrine and noradrenaline, or epinephrine and adrenaline, they're the same thing. So norepinephrine, noradrenaline is the precursor. Adrenaline or epinephrine is the adrenaline feeling. That's the rush. So they're associated with focus and attention and kind of keeping you going during the goal pursuit. Cortisol, often linked to stress. Cortisol is released when you're tackling difficult challenges, things that put you under stress. Exercise is the most perfect example. You're putting your body into stress and you grow from that stress. In small amounts, it heightens alertness. But again, chronic elevation can impair goal achievement because it's too much of a drain on your body. Oxytocin is another one. It's the bonding hormone. And this plays a role in collaborative or relational goals. So anytime that you're talking about teamwork, anytime you're talking about mutual goals between people, oxytocin is at play here. That's the bonding hormone. And then finally, one to call out here is testosterone. Testosterone is linked to competitiveness and drive. If we don't have testosterone, we're not having that same internal drive and competition. And now again, too much, too far competition, too much, where it's, if we go back to the episode on ambition, we talk about the different types of drive. Too much can lead to envy, which is really dangerous, but in the right amounts, that competitiveness, that drive can help us achieve more. And as long as we're combining that with oxytocin, then we're able to do things at a healthier level. So let's talk about a little bit what's going on, neuroscience in action, kind of the goal cycle. So when we set out on a goal, right, we start to have some anticipation of that goal, you're going to have dopamine spikes. That's the beginning, right? And you're going to say, I can do this. And you're going to get really excited about the potential outcomes and what that's going to feel like. So your dopamine starts to go up when you set that meaningful goal, and it drives excitement. It kind of builds commitment. And then you get into the work of effort and challenge. Now it's in the pursuit. And that's when the prefrontal cortex comes in. When things get hard and you're doing those hard things, it's the anterior mid-cingulate cortex that's engaged. Your focus and attention increases. You're having to adapt. And all of that is increasing your norepinephrine, your noradrenaline, eventually your adrenaline. And of course, cortisol is at play because it can be stressful. As you're starting to see some small wins, you're starting to see some progress, then you start to see that dopamine increase again. So that releases it within incremental achievements. It reinforces the effort that you're putting in. Then you have achievement. Now you're starting to see real progress, okay? That dopamine surges upon success. Endorphins and serotonin create lasting satisfaction. And then you reflect upon that and you start to establish the habits. That's where the basal ganglia helps to encode that process, that entire cycle, into habits, automating that future goal pursuit. That's as technical as I want to get. That's probably way more technical than I wanted it to be. But that's some of the neuroscience that's going on in the brain when it comes to goal pursuits. And now I want to talk about one of the myths that we often hear when it comes to goal setting and goal pursuits. And that's this whole idea of it takes 21 days to build a habit. I got bad news for y'all. That's a myth. And it comes from a very misrepresented and misinterpreted book from a plastic surgeon back in 1960. And that surgeon observed that it took his patients about 21 days to adjust their new appearances after surgery. So they would have the surgery, and it would take them about 21 days before they were kind of accepting of that new appearance and making the adjustments. And so his work was all about how long it takes to adjust to that self-image as opposed to actually establishing habits. Here we are, all right? And this myth has perpetuated through the last 60 years, making us think that that's the reality. Research tells a different picture, paints a different picture for us. It actually tells us that it takes anywhere from 18 to 254 days, with an average of about 66 days, to turn typical or common actions into more automatic behaviors or habits. Why the big spread between 18 and 254? It can depend on the complexity of the habit. So something simple like maybe remembering to hydrate before a game is much easier to lock in than something more involved, like learning how to change your mental approach after a bad outing, a bad game. That's much more complex than just simply remembering to hydrate. So that's the complexity of the habit is at play here. Another big part of it is how often you practice that habit. So repetition is everything. The more consistently you practice, you're creating those neural pathways, your long-term potentiation. The faster that neural pathway starts to solidify, you're clearing the way, and then the easier that habit is to continue. And then certainly your environment as well. So if your surroundings your environment supports the habit that you're trying to pursue, it's easier for you to keep it going. But if you're constantly surrounded by distractions or by bad influences, it's going to take you longer for that habit to stick. The bottom line is this: habits, informing habits and building habits over time and turning them into traits is a long game. And they're built through compounding action. It's tiny, consistent efforts that you stack up over time. It's never about perfection. It's about showing up day after day until that habit starts to become who you are. Okay, it's just part of who you are. So I know that that's kind of technical. I know I talked really fast through that. Again, I did not want to get super in the weeds on that and super in depth. I wanted to give you enough of an idea of what's going on the brain level. If you want to skip that part, that's great. If you want to revisit that part, if you thought it is relevant or useful, that's great too. I just wanted to get it out there. Now that we have that foundation, again, what's happening in your brain, how long it takes to form habits, I want to get really practical with you. I'm going to walk you through 5 quick and powerful neuroscience supported strategies that are going to help you turn those goals into habits that are sustainable for you. And these are in no particular order, but in my personal opinion, the last one that I'm going to give you, it might just be the best bang for your buck. And if you do nothing else, that one's really going to help you. So let's roll. The first tool in this is going back to create a player identity and never summit goals. One of the best places to start with goal setting and goal pursuit and habit formation is thinking about and building an emotional connection to the person that you want to become. And I'm going to strongly recommend you check out or revisit episode 8 on ambition, where I talked about this specifically. You don't have to stop this episode, but if you want to go back and check that out and then restart here, it's not going to hurt. In that episode, I cover the 5 bricks of the ambition pillar, including create a player identity-based goal setting and never summit target setting. These are powerful ways to establish habits and build identity and to stay resilient and to have and maintain continuous improvement. And this is the first tool for turning goals into habits. It's making sure that you have the creative player identities and never summit targets. Of course, I also cover in that episode the other bricks in the ambition pillar, including values and vision and standards and boundaries and drive. And it's specifically about generative drive. And these are big parts of it as well. But for the creative player identity-based goal setting, you're going to design the skills and traits and even that kind of a swagger of the player and the person that you want to be. And then you're going to think about the habits and actions that make that come to life. And then you execute it. Why is this powerful? Because identity-based goals align with your brain. When your actions are tied to who you believe you are and who you want to become, they become second nature. So again, the example I used in that episode, I think, was it's not about I need to exercise 3 days a week. It's I am a person who exercises. That's building the identity around the actions and behaviors that you know are important in order for you to achieve the goals that you want to achieve. And then you combine that identity-based goal setting with never summit targets. So traditional goals often feel like summits. Your goal is to climb a mountain. And when you reach the top, you typically have to come back down. And in real life, people who achieve big climbs, literally, or major milestones, such as a big race or a big project or a big life goal, in the aftermath of that, their dopamine drops far below baseline, and it can lead to depressive moods or states. And that's where never summit targets come in. These are dynamic goals that evolve as you evolve. As you grow and develop and get stronger or faster, whatever it is your goal is, then your goals continually increase, and they keep that fire alive and ensure continuous improvement. And this approach eliminates that post-goal slump by anchoring your pursuit in a growth mindset. So I need you to I embrace the identity of somebody who is a relentless learner and competitor. It doesn't mean that you don't celebrate. It doesn't mean you don't have contentment. You need to have a reward system. And remember, you're content, but you're just not complacent. It means you're looking for the next challenge and always looking for ways to improve. So the first tool, again, is establish your creative player identity and your never summit goals. The second tool for turning goals into habits is something I got from author James Clear in the book Atomic Habits. And a few of these actually come from that book. It's the perfect book for this topic. And it's the idea of habit stacking. Your brain loves routines. And if you can tie a habit or attach a habit or stack a habit to something you already do, every day. It's almost like turning a double play or pulling off a double steal. Like if you're going to get one out, you might as well get two. If you're going to steal one runner, you might as well steal two, right? One is already in motion. And so you stack on the other one to go along with it while you're at it. Habit stacking is all about linking that new habit to something you already do almost automatically, like without even having to think about it. You've got a good habit, you've got a good practice or good routine, something that you do, and then you're just going to associate and do another habit that you want to start to do along with that. Morning routines, evening routines. These are things that if you've got things that you already are doing without really thinking about it, they're perfect ways to start to ingrain some of these new habits. And this is thanks to something called synaptic pruning. That's just basically another way to think about long-term potentiation. So as you're walking down that path, now I'm going to do something else while I'm walking on that path. Okay. This is your brain's way of strengthening the synaptic connections for the things you do while trimming away the things that you don't. When you attach a new habit to an existing one, you're piggybacking on a process that's already automated in your brain. So instead of creating a new neural pathway from scratch, you're simply adding a branch to, adding a piece to what's already a solid foundation. So if you're walking along a path already, now you're just adding another habit with it. The first step to do this is to begin having awareness and maybe even starting to track some of the good habits that you already have in your routines that could be suitable to stack with. So for example, if you already wake up in the morning and you've established the habit of drinking, let's say 16 ounces of water first thing when you wake up, and you have a goal that you want to start visualizing or practicing meditation, or maybe doing some stretching first thing in the morning to get loose. Okay. If you've already have that habit of drinking water, now as soon as you drink the water, you're going to take 5 minutes to do that meditation or visualization. And now those habits become stacked. So when you drink your water, you're doing your visualization. That's stacking habits. And this works because your brain craves that efficiency. When you're tying those habits together, you make it easier to remember and execute. So here's my challenge to you. I want you to write down a couple habits that you already do. And then I want you to figure out which one you can establish and stack a new habit to. So whatever your goal is, and you know that the actions associated with that, I want you to stack on top of it. And the beauty of this habit stacking is momentum. Once you've built and nailed one habit, you can stack it to another. And then eventually you can stack on a third. And then eventually you can stack on a fourth if you need to. Now you've got a bunch of new habits and routines that you just do. That's the second tool. All right. So this one, for the third tool, I'm going to go back a little bit. And this probably fits a little bit better in the goal setting step from the previous episode, but I didn't do it there. We're going to do it here. But it's still relevant here. And tool number 3 is the sweet spot rule, or something called the Goldilocks rule. Again, this is something that I got from James Clear, and I call it the sweet spot rule. When you set goals and you're wondering how hard or how easy to set them, think of it like you need to find the sweet spot on a bat. Okay. You can get a hit off the handle, or you can get a hit off the end of the bat. But the real power and the damage comes from when you find that sweet spot. And that's exactly what we're aiming for with our goals. What is the sweet spot when it comes to goals? Goals that are too easy are boring. You don't enjoy it. You don't get anything out of it. It's not worth it. They don't make you that much better. If it's goals that are nearly impossible, you get frustrated because you're never going to achieve it and you're set up to fail. But if you find goals that stretch you and scare you and kind of on that edge of no way, and you know that it's going to be hard as heck, but you can do it if you work at it, that's the sweet spot. If I had one food to eat for the rest of my life, it would be steak. And when you cook steak, you can get it rare, you can get it medium rare, you can get it medium, you can get medium well, and you can get it well done. And if you think of the difficulty level of goals like this, that's your scale, rare to well done. Easy, kind of easy, medium level easy, right? Kind of not easy, not hard. It's going to stretch you a bit. And then it's really freaking hard. Now, me personally, I like my steak medium rare. That's the only way. And if you're one of those weirdos that likes steak well done, I can't help you. Goals are different. I don't want my goals to be medium rare. I don't want my goals to be kind of easy. I need them to be scary. They need to be hard, but they shouldn't be well done, aka nearly impossible. If you do that too often, you're setting yourself up to fail. They need to be in that sweet spot of medium wells where they stretch you, they scare you, but you know if you put in the work consistently, you can do it. You don't want to cook your steak medium well, but you do want to set your goals there. So to do this, here's my challenge to you. I want you to take one of your current goals and I want you to tack on some additional levels of difficulty. And not a lot. Maybe it's like 10%, right? Maybe it's 15%, just a little bit harder. Maybe you condense your time frame a bit. Maybe you extend the numbers a little bit, however you're going to measure that, but just make it a little bit harder, but not impossible. If it makes you, like the question you got to ask yourself is, I can do this, but it's going to take work. What does that look like? That's your sweet spot. I want you to start there. I want you to see what happens. And then what you do is you apply that never summit concept. And when you achieve that goal, then you set out a new goal that stretches you further. And you set out a new goal that stretches you further. And that's how you combine or kind of habit stacking within the habits or within the tools. That's the third tool. The fourth tool combines a few concepts that I've talked about before, specifically in episode 10 on the mindset pillar. So again, if you want to go back and check out episode 8 on the ambition pillar, and you want to go back and check out episode 10 on the mindset pillar, two great places to kind of reinforce some of these concepts and revisit some of these concepts. We talked about win the inning, and embedded in that win the inning, in that brick, is the concept called chunking. And it's breaking big tasks and big time frames into small chunks where you can just focus on being present and executing that small chunk of time and executing the small tasks within that bigger goal. And when you fall short or you step off the path, it's not failure because it's just one inning. It's just one piece of it, right? It's not an overall loss. And really what it is just data. It's just data points. So think about it. In baseball, you know that the best hitters are going to fail 7 out of 10 times. And when they fail, that's just data. That's information. It allows them to be curious. What worked? What didn't work? What can I do different? How's my approach going to change? It's not about how often you fail. It's what you do with that failure and that information. So if you missed a workout, ask why. Adjust your schedule. If you struggle out looking, you analyze the pitch sequence and you make a plan for the next at bat. And when you use failure, when you see failure as feedback, not as an outcome, you're not losing, you're learning. Your brain is wired to be able to course correct. And when you make a mistake, the error signals in your brain activate, it fine tunes your behaviors, helps your decision making. And every time that you recognize and adjust, and this takes an intentional thought, you're rewiring your brain to overcome and to succeed. Your working memory thrives on breaking things down, on chunking, and then resetting and refocusing, and then applying it again. So to do this, you want to have a short-term memory. That's another big piece of this, is having a short-term memory. Chunk your goals. One bad at bat, one bad morning, one bad day doesn't have to ruin the rest of your time frame. Stay locked in, focus on small, manageable chunks of time. And then when something goes wrong, forget it, hit the mental reset button, move forward, clean slate. When one inning ends, a new inning's coming. When one game wraps, the next game in the series is coming up. When the series ends, there's still more games in the season. When that season ends, there's next season. Here's my action step to you, my challenge to you on this tool. Check out episode 10 and figure out how you can apply the win the inning brick, that short-term memory, that using failure as feedback and chunking to help you sustain habits when things go sideways. The last tool I'm going to give you, I'm going to talk about breaking bad habits. The key to habit formation is not willpower. It's about putting obstacles between you and the temptations or the habits that you're trying to break. When our daughter was a toddler, she used to suck her thumb. And we tried a whole bunch of different ways to get her to stop, but she just kept doing it. The thumb would go back in her mouth. And then one day we put on, I don't know what it was, but we put on this nasty smelling and apparently nasty tasting liquid. It was like this ointment on her thumb. And when she put it in her mouth, that was it. That was the end. She never put it back in her mouth again. Young brains are very plastic, and it's much easier for them to learn and to unlearn, right? So to learn new habits, to teach new habits, and to break habits. That's neuroplasticity, right? That's the ability to learn and change. As we get older, it's harder to do that. But that's just an example of something that we did. We created friction, okay? And that's the fifth tool, is creating friction between your bad habits. If you want to avoid, let's say that you have a goal that you want to avoid social media before a game. You have a bad habit of being on your phone too much. Well, how do you create friction? Leave your phone in the locker room. Leave it in your dorm room. Leave it at home. Whatever friction points you can create. If you're trying to eat healthier, well, get all the junk food out of the pantry. When the path So your bad habit is harder. You're far less likely to go down that path. Friction disrupts the brain's automatic habit loops. And when your go-to response is interrupted, your brain has to engage intentionally and purposefully, and it gives you a chance to make a different choice. It's like kind of shifting gears mid-play. You regain control, right? You regain that composure. It's the same thing with when your stress levels are going up and you take a deep breath, all of a sudden now you're back present. You can make a different choice because you're thinking about it. So what I want you to do for this is I want you to pick one bad habit that's holding you back. Pick one bad habit that you know is not serving you. And this week, I want you to figure out how you can add small but effective obstacles and friction points between you and that habit, and then see how much easier it is for you to stay on track. So let's recap these 5 tools for turning your goals and actions into habits. The first is create a player identity and never summit goal setting. Build that identity of who you are and how you're going to continuously improve. The second tool is habit stacking. What habits do you already have that are good? And how can you use those to stack on new habits that become ingrained in your routines? The third is the sweet spot of the Goldilocks rules, making goals hard, but not too hard that you're set up to fail, and certainly not too easy. The fourth is using failure as a feedback, having short-term memory, and to chunking. And then the fifth is creating friction in the habits that you need to break. Those are your 5 tools that are going to help you turn your goals into habits and eventually into traits. Now it's your turn. I want you to take one strategy from today. I want you to put it in action this week. Success is never about being perfect. It's about persistence. So keep grinding, keep climbing, stay focused. We'll see you next time.